I'm going to open the meeting of the AdHOC MPO RFP Project Committee. Yeah, come on up here, Mark, John. You can sit close if you want. There's a little button on your microphone that you can use to turn it on. And Rob, you want to turn us on for recording? Good. Then I'll declare the meeting open and check to see if we have a quorum, and we have 4, so we do have a quorum. We have several items to cover this morning, and I'm going to act as the interim chair until we get officers named. I suppose everybody knows who's up here. Bernard Hudemeyer is on my far left, Mark Sanderson to my immediate left, John Squire to my right, and I'm Skip McCormick, and I'm acting as interim chair for the moment. We have the first item to cover is nomination and election of officers. We need to elect a chair, a vice chair, and decide on a secretary.
I'll go ahead and throw my name in as chair.
Okay. Anybody else?
I'll put my name as vice chair.
That's easy.
That seems like the easiest job.
Okay. Any other nominations for chair? None? We ought to nominate some of the people that aren't here, don't you think?
Give it.
I think we can do that. We can take them with
No, okay, I'm just joking. Okay, so we'll vote for chair. All in favor of John Squire for chair? Looks like you win. All in favor of Mark Sanderson for vice chair? Any nomination?
I can vote for myself, okay.
Okay.
We'll apply that then.
Okay, unanimous election of John Squire as chair and Mark Sanderson as vice chair. Okay. Secretary, Minnie has volunteered to act as secretary. It's kind of up to us. One of my concerns was that we have one female member, and while she might be interested in volunteering, she hasn't volunteered, and typically a group of males with one female, the female always gets to be secretary. So I didn't want to fall into that sexist sort of trap. Okay.
Do we defer the vote for some time
Yes,
accept it?
I think we can. We're recording our session this morning, and each of you has a microphone, and there's a button on your microphone where you can turn it on and make your voice heard to the recording.
Skip, I recommend that this position of secretary be deferred until we have not a full quorum, but we have a quorum, but with Jack Joyce and Robert
Certainly,
Riley.
the people that we
Don,
want to vote for should be here as well, too,
Right.
and be able to accept or reject
I think
the
would be
nomination.
appropriate, right.
Okay, so in favor of deferring the secretary? Okay, that's unanimous as well. I have a couple of announcements that I want to make. The revisions to the AAMPO schedule and the impact on our plans. If you'll excuse me, John, I'll go ahead with this, and you can take over after I'm done if you want.
Why don't you keep doing what you're doing right now?
Okay. We had discussed the MPO plans to issue RFPs, a request for proposals, in October. And last summer, they announced that they were going to delay that slightly. Originally they were going to be in August, but they were deferred to October. After the last time we had an opportunity to meet, and I had a chance to check the minutes of the last meeting of the policy committee, and they have deferred issuing RFPs for the time being for this year because they have so many projects underway at the moment. Now, I have asked for copies of the RFP and the response documents from 2016, and I haven't yet received them. So I'm going to send in a request for an open records request for those documents. And we can use that information to help us prepare projects, even though they haven't issued an RFP. I believe that we can make those proposals through the technical review committee of the MPO, the planning organization, and that they can be considered by the MPO even though they haven't issued an RFP. So while we have less chance of getting a lot of things accepted, we have some chance of getting them before the MPO, regardless of the fact that they're not going to be issuing an RFP this year. In addition, we have other projects that we can do that don't require MPO input. One of those was the consideration of parks and a parks commission. And we've talked about this individually, some of us already. Bernard, you had done some preparation on this. Do you want to talk about that real quick?
Yeah, I thought it'd be nice to have some more equipment, like in the commons, and like exercise fitness equipment, just freestanding, not non-moving, things of that sort, to get the community out and be a healthier community where we can maybe even talk to each other when we're working out. So it's
One of the things that we had talked about was the use of the school park system, the playground equipment and the open areas at the schools. The Eisenhower is planning on putting in a walking track that I understand will be open to the public.
yes, Castle Hills Elementary.
Yeah, Castle Hills Elementary, I'm sorry, yes. And
You said Eisenhower or Castle Hills?
Castle Hills Elementary.
Castle Hills,
They're putting in a walking track?
yes.
Wonderful.
And
They'll keep that gate open then now?
right, they're going to keep the gate open, and well, all Northeast school districts are, the operations superintendent said that's their goal, is to, after school and on weekends, to have all the gates open, people can go and walk and use the playgrounds. So that they're like parks now.
Right, right. That is wonderful, because we tried that about 4 or 5 years ago, and they weren't as receptive at that point in time. There was the desire, but they didn't know how to handle that. So that's wonderful news to hear.
Is the walking track the only facility that will be open to the public, or will there be additional devices, things, playground things that kids can utilize?
The playground will be open as well.
Oh,
So
well,
it's the
that's-
whole area.
That's
And
fantastic. We have a start date for that? Do we have like a beginning date where they're
they already started on the track. So I'm not sure when. I asked, I asked the city manager if he could see about finishing the sidewalk along Honeysuckle next to the school, where there's a gate, and maybe we can get some ADA ramps right next to the gate, so we can, so if someone needs that, it's there. And what else? The superintendent of operations at NEISD also gave $8,000 for some extra equipment on the playground for special needs and things of that. So, and the PTA also put in $2,000. So that's a good start for our community, and keep everything.
Mr. Squire, I reached out to NISD already to see if we can get the ball rolling on some type of agreement, which would be some type of funding partnership to where we can get sidewalks that ties down Honeysuckle and then the ADA ramp into the entrance of the playground.
Tanya,
One of the things we pursued, and we did some preliminary work on putting sidewalks down Honeysuckle. Actually, it was part of widening Honeysuckle so you could have a drop-off. There was some effort put into that. Is there any value in pulling that information back again to give to NEISD to say this is what we really envisioned? It was an MPO. It was working as an MPO submission a few years ago.
I'm not aware of that particular project, but I mean, something that could be revisited if you
Okay.
would like.
Well, I think you may want to look at that, and at very least, sidewalks do need to go in. I mean, really all around the castle's mentioned. we
Right,
need
but I
sidewalks
was just
in.
trying to get it started,
Absolutely, yeah. Kind of take a
That's
bite off
great.
at a time.
Right,
anyways,
right,
so-
right.
one of the things that we talked about with Mr. Rapley last time, he submitted in the past a number of applications for grants to Texas Parks and Wildlife. And they do have a special series of grants for parks and recreations in various communities. So what we need to do to be able to apply for those grants is to have a parks commission and a an inventory of our existing parks and a plan for future parks, some sort of a plan. And these installations of playground equipment and that sort of thing are exactly the kinds of things that the Parks and Wildlife Commissions might be able to provide some money for through grant, providing we meet the standards that they have for that application. In order to do that, we have to have a Parks Commission, we have to have an inventory of parks, and we have to have a long-term plan for how we're going to develop our parks. First thing to do, I guess, would be to appoint a Parks Commission. So what I want to consider and hear comments about is whether we should recommend to the City Council that they appoint a Parks Commission. I've thought that 3 people would probably be adequate, but any number that you think is appropriate, we could recommend to the council and they could consider acting on it. Any thoughts?
Well, the knee-jerk thought here is, would it make some sense for this committee to take on that active role as serving as the Parks Commission, since really we're trying to drive for funds to help our city with infrastructure improvements, and that would maybe dovetail into what we've been tasked with.
Okay. Anybody else?
I like that idea, if it's possible, because it does fit in with our goals as a project
Okay.
committee.
Any thoughts about what we want to look at for long-term parks? The considerations are that we don't have any land, and we don't have a lot of money.
Right.
So,
I keep on coming back to the Boy Scouts. Beautiful piece of property up there, and can we lease this? Can we get into some kind of agreement with them? So we're going to improve this for you. Call this Castle Hills Park, and we're going to do a 99-year lease and do some improvement and kind of be a steward of some portion of that land there. I think that might be worthwhile to continue to look. I believe that you've taken some early steps in that direction right there, and have knowledge of folks that might have a better idea how to make that work.
Mm-hmm. To tag on that idea, we may consider tasking the city manager with developing the relationship along with the mayor, since the mayor does have an ongoing relationship with the with members of our local Boy Scouts.
Yeah, that's a beautiful piece of land. I mean, I think everybody, anytime anybody drives by there, they look at that and they just, love to be able to use that. Love
We'd love to clean up the front of that also too.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, which maybe we could work as far as negotiation that will help to maintain it if they allow us to use part of it or something.
Right.
And it certainly looks like it could need some help.
don't they have to mow that thing every so often? That's a lot of land to mow.
They're supposed to, yes, I believe.
I'm sorry?
They're supposed to, but they don't.
What's your light on there? Pull it
Yeah,
up where you can speak into it.
It's on. I said they're supposed to, but they don't. It looks really bad. I
Des?
mean, if we could help maintain it, that'd be nice. I mean, even if we put strict guidelines on it that, it's only open to Castle Hills residents. I'm sure they don't want the whole world there,
We don't want any overnight guests. I mean, that would probably be something we want
Right.
to limit there for sure.
If we could establish some type of land use agreement or use agreement with them, then that might have been the responsibility of the city to do the maintenance portion as far as use of the property.
Like on the front, just even frontage, just on Northwest Military, just keep that.
All that can be defined in an agreement, obviously.
But, it's all in how they feel too,
And I'll say this, is years ago, there was a kind of a separation that was in place. And my personal belief is that has since mitigated itself, and I think they've been wanting to work with, and we brought, like, for example, for Fiesta, we would bring the Boy Scouts in to help out. They were helping with the runners it's been a very good relationship that we've been building on over the years, and why not leverage that and move forward?
Sound like an idea. Is everybody in favor of, well, I guess maybe we should consider a motion whether we volunteer this committee to act also as the Parks Commission, at least for the time being. if we want to volunteer to the council to do that, we can offer it as an option.
I'll second that if that's. If that's a
Okay,
motion.
then we'll take it, do we want to vote on it? All in favor of volunteering to act as a Parks Commission? Okay, that passes unanimously. And our duties as Parks Commission, then, if the council agrees with that and accepts our volunteer, would be to, one, create an inventory of parks. Pretty straightforward, we got one, that's the Commons. And two, to make a plan for long-term park operations for the city, and that would include the cooperative activity with the local schools, perhaps one on the south side and something on the north side, which could be the Boy Scout camp, or maybe some other piece of property, or maybe a church playground or something of that sort that we could share. But it's going to have to be a shared operation. And then to pursue grants for the installation of playground equipment if we have that opportunity, and if we see that it's an appropriate thing and our partner agrees with it. Okay? And I guess that takes care of that.
I would also suggest that if in the future, if anyone ever donates land to dedicate to parks, that this group would be the ones to review and approve eventually what the use might be as well.
Okay? I think that's reasonable. I think that would be one of the things.
I'm not saying that there's someone waiting to donate land, but I'm just saying,
Yeah.
again, if someone does donate land and dedicate it to parks use, then that may be something to consider.
To that angle right there, I mean, I don't know if there's anything that's actually happening now or in the future, but if there is land that for whatever reason becomes owned by the city, would we then want to go ahead and perhaps convert these into like mini parks? That might be, somewhat randomly distributed around the city itself. Something that would give the folks on the south and north side or east or west, a small park for children or just for, general gathering.
Yeah.
Something along the lines of the commons. That the city would accomplish this ownership of this land through whatever means.
I think what you're referring to is pocket parks. So if any of them come available in any neighborhood and we dedicate it as a pocket park, then whatever use comes out of it could be decided.
Certainly some kind of beautification where, we had, an issue before, that issue was solved, and now we're able to go ahead and turn around and use that land in a positive fashion.
Some cities have turned little pocket parks into like gardening type areas and those kind of things.
An urban garden where you eat some tomatoes or whatever, sure, yeah, that's great stuff there.
Okay, one of the things that's consideration when somebody donates land is whether we're going to accept that property as a gift. Because there may be a donation of some property that has an environmental problem or something else that somebody would just like to get rid of because of the burden of cleaning up of something of that sort. So this is a case where we are obligated to look the gift horse in the mouth to make sure that it's got all its teeth.
Well, I'm sure this group could vet it out, but if ultimately it would take city council to accept the donation of the land.
Yeah, I think it belongs to the city council. That's their decision, and that's something that we have to make sure that they get the opportunity to do before we engage in some kind of a problem. Any comments from the public? You want to come up and speak into the microphone, Patsy? Just so we get you on the record. Yeah, there's one right there. You just push the little button on the front of the microphone when the green light comes on. Speak into
There's 3 little dashes there on either side of the center. If you push those, the green light should
Okay.
turn on.
There you go.
I would just like to say that I would love to see some pocket parks, and maybe we could get the help of the Castle Hills Garden Club and also the Women's Club involved in that.
That'd be great.
I also have pictures of a pocket park that I saw in Arkansas that I brought back, and it was just a small little piece of land that they hadn't built a house on, and they made a gazebo, and they planted it, and it was just like this beautiful meditation park where people could just go and visit. And I have pictures, so I'll share that with you if you're interested.
Sure.
Do you have them with you,
I think
Patsy?
that would be a great idea. Thank you.
Thank you.
What's it called, that they have like the Japanese meditation parks where they have like the stones and the sand and
Yeah,
stuff like
Zen
that?
Park. Yeah.
Those are kind of slick. Some running water there, that's good.
And it was just a piece of land, just where my warehouse was. Yeah, this is just kind of what it looked like. But it's not any more than a plot for your house. Or a house. Right.
Okay, so with the consent of this group, I'm going to recommend to the council that we establish a Parks Commission and volunteer this committee to act as a Parks Commission temporarily until the council makes a decision otherwise,
So at the very least, as an interim Parks
as
Commission?
an interim Parks Commission.
Okay. We'd have to set, I guess we'd have to set our goals, I assume, at this point with the goals for obtaining funding
And that's-
for the parks.
Yeah.
For trying to develop some parks within our community. And work with Texas Department of Parks
Texas
and
Parks and
Wildlife.
Wildlife, yeah. Okay, let's move on to the project ideas that we had, I know some of you have done quite a lot of work on project ideas already. And so we've had our list from our little social gathering some time back, where we had a number of things that we were going to try to include as ideas. Do any of you have some new ones you want to bring up?
Skip, let me, if I may, if I can divert for a second, there was some discussion earlier as far as the deferred RFP. Did they put any sort of timing on that?
They did not. The meeting of August 23rd, I guess it was not published until mid-September. And so they didn't put anything in there. It just said they were not going to publish RFPs this year because they had so many projects already that they had more to do than they really could attend to.
Okay.
So I think if we have a really good idea, I think we can still submit that through the Technical Review Committee. And I think that I have a means to get into that and to talk to people. I mean,
You do, good.
yeah, I've been to the meeting several times, and I know some of the people that are there. And there is an opportunity for the public to speak at the beginning of the meetings, just like we have. And so if we had a presentation that we could keep down to 3 or 4 minutes, I think we can do it and publish and submit the proper application paperwork that would go with an RFP. And I think they would consider it. It's not to say that it's going to go any further than they have in the past, but if we don't ask, we sure won't get anything.
Agreed, all right, yeah. Okay, thanks for
Makes
answering
sense.
that. I just, reason I was looking at the published projects, and they're through 2022, I believe.
Yeah.
2019 through 2022. And I'm hoping that, the process is not going to wait until, say, 2021 before we can start doing submissions. And that's my concern. I was looking for some clarification in that regard.
No, the big projects are going to take a lot of time. For example, if we were able to come up among ourselves with something that would mitigate the congestion that occurs around West and 410 and Jackson Keller, that intersection in front of the HEB, if we could find something to do with that, I have no doubt that would be considered with some seriousness, because that's one of the most congested intersections in the state, one of the 100 worst congestion areas. And so anything we could do to solve that problem for them, I think they would attend to. So far,
Be a good candidate, basically. is what
that
you're
would
saying.
be a really good candidate for something. It's not to say that there aren't a whole bunch of things that we could do, and kind of what I'm thinking is, if any of you have something particular that you're interested in, I think that would be maybe a driving force to select a project that you want to work on. Because if it's something you're interested in, you know, that's something that you would devote some time to and some thought to, and maybe we could come up with some useful ideas. I don't know if you've looked at the history of science, for example, but most of the great discoveries in the last 200-300 years were done by amateurs.
Interesting.
In astronomy, it still is.
Yeah, and astronomy it still is.
Could be so bold to ask, I know, Bernard, you had some wonderful ideas that you kind of presented the last couple of weeks. Do you mind sharing those? Would now be a good time?
As opposed to like sidewalks and
Sidewalks, and you, I was trying to remember something, you did talk about the parks.
The
as
parks.
part of that too, which we've already discussed. Was there any others that,
so sidewalks on Lock Hill, Selma, it's not our property, it would be the city of San Antonio, but maybe we could work in partnership with them, trying to get them to put a sidewalk on our side, or closer to Castle Hills on Lock Hill, Selma, from, say, West Avenue to Blanco. That would be nice, because there's a lot of people walking there, and there's bus routes there too, so it'd be, I guess, safer for people. Because if there's a sidewalk there, they probably want to put a curb as well, which is good and bad. Depends on the drainage, and so maybe they won't put a curb. Maybe they'll just do sidewalk. I mean, anything would help. Just it'd be a little bit safer. I walk that sometimes, so it's safety for the citizens, San Antonio or Castle Hills, anybody, for people. That's one area. The fitness equipment commons was another one. But there are sidewalks, I think you mentioned somewhere else that you thought needed sidewalks.
well, one of my concerns were crosswalks.
Crosswalks.
So we can, basically, one of my concerns in the city is the lack of walkability.
Mm-hmm.
We have essentially 4 sections of our city. You know, you have the south part of the city, which is segregated by unfortunately 410. Then we have Northwest Military, and then West Avenue. And we do not have a good way for pedestrians, for bicyclists. We don't have a good way to get across any of those, fortunately. Now, 410 is going to be the hard one, obviously, to work on. But if we could do something with West Avenue, or something with Northwest Military, with TxDOT, obviously, in this case, because it's not our street, it's TxDOT street. If we could do that and at least put some more crosswalks in, and I brought it up before in the past, I think that would be very helpful to get people to cross. You know, you got one crosswalk, and I think at Carrollwood, is that correct?
Yep.
And then you got to go all the way to West Avenue before you can cross. And I have seen many times people darting across the street, you know, and that's just, it's unsafe, but they have no choice.
Near Sunflower and
So, exactly.
Canton.
Exactly, and especially kids that are going across the street. I think they need to look at how we can, number one, allow people to cross safely, but number two, when the guys of bringing our city together to help walkability. That would also include bike lanes, which we do not have on that street, nor do we have on West Avenue.
Right.
And we need to have we need to consider those as a thought process. And crosswalks on West Avenue in that case too. There's one, let's see if I recall right, there's only one crosswalk by the school by Antonian, if I recall
No,
right.
not even.
Not even there. So it's all the way down. It's all the way down on 410.
410 and Northwest
West Ave,
Military.
and then Northwest Military.
Yeah,
And that's it.
that's it.
And you know, how do you get across in there? That's just a travesty.
And sidewalks on West Avenue, I thought it was, I thought when we're dealing with VIA, with the city council was dealing with VIA to renew their contract or with the city, they were talking about, the VIA was talking about putting sidewalks on West Avenue on the, I don't know what side it would be, but there's sidewalks on one side, but not on the other. And they were talking about putting sidewalks on the other side
Right.
of West Avenue. So not Antonian side, but the other side.
Right.
I don't know how to say it, but
Probably the southeast side.
right. And there was never anything done about that. But it would be nice to have a sidewalk on that side as well, on both sides of West Avenue.
The way VIA justified that is because of their existing bus stops. They, I believe, are required, and Ryan, you may correct me if I'm wrong here, but I believe they're required to provide sidewalks or a way to access those bus stops, because some are just in the middle of
Right.
of the blocks. And if I looked at the latest, as I looked at the latest plan for what they're doing on West Avenue, I think they moved a lot of they eliminated some of the bus stops, and they moved some, I think, closer to the intersections, so they don't have to do the sidewalks, if I recall right. Is that-
Right now, they're putting in the 8 concrete via bus pads right now. And then towards the end of this year, they're gonna start the shelter at Antonian. And the idea was that they were trying to align the new shelter that's gonna go at Antonian across West Avenue and be able to put that crosswalk in and put a pedestrian refuge in the middle of West Avenue so you could cross
That'd be
safely.
nice.
And that's something that could be looked at as well from that standpoint. I think any of the new shelters that they're putting in right now don't have sidewalks to them right now. I know there was some talk about one up by St. George, but they actually did not want the shelter. They just want the bus pad at their location.
Yeah, and having sidewalks that's, along West Avenue would,
There was some talk of adding sidewalks there possibly, and getting the right of way, and there was some, I think there were some landscaping issues, but I think all that could have been taken care of. But at the end, I think they've decided not to have one of the shelters that's gonna be at Antonian at
Right,
St.
right,
George.
right.
But they are gonna have the concrete bus pad.
yeah, so, I mean.
And I think there's an idea of putting some type of bench there, maybe, additional bench as a, not necessarily as a result of not having the shelter, but they are gonna make some type of addition to it.
So not overthinking stuff, just, how are we gonna get to the bus stop? I mean, sidewalks would be nice along the whole West Avenue, so.
We have some issues on Blanco as well, too, where it's between, Antler and Cass Hills. There is actually no sidewalk at all.
You're right.
And if there is indeed a requirement that VIA has to go ahead and build the sidewalk between the two stops, and I guess that right there is something they should be looking at right now, because I believe there is a stop that is north and south of that section of missing sidewalk.
And going more towards 410 as well, Cass Hills towards 410.
Yeah, then
think
there's an
there's-
entire block with actually,
Right.
there's like, you can see there's, well, I guess an alleyway there, I guess, the old alleyways there between the houses. There's that, and then they have just, it looks like there is, the land there is kind of bumpy and hilly there in that particular section. It looks like not a really good place to build a sidewalk up, and assuming they could. But, that and, as far as the safety stuff for our end of things, is basically 4-way stop signs on everything on Buckaroo. I don't know if you all noticed that when you all drive through that particular area, right, there is no stop signs there. Of course, folks can run through there. And then, speed bumps eventually. But I know there's a lot of resistance to speed bumps here in the
But
city.
slowing down traffic is the goal.
At least
for-
getting
for
people
the-
to go ahead and stop at a stop sign would certainly not cause any harm to any vehicles at all. And of course, for emergency vehicles, it's irrelevant. So, I mean, they can run right through it, of course.
One of the things that you suggested, I don't know if it was you or Mr. Squire, that suggested the sidewalks on Lock Hill, Selma, that maybe eventually this group could work up a scope to deliver to San Antonio towards their next bond in 2022, where you can incorporate drainage improvements along Lock Hill as well as sidewalks. So again, I've already brought to their attention across from like Glen Tower that inlet is very small. The capacity's not taking the water that goes down it, and they already know that they're going to have to improve that channel in particular. So it might be something that develop a scope by this group and eventually submit towards their 2022 bond projects as a possibility.
Let me ask the question, and to Skip, is it within our purview to recommend or push forward drainage-related concerns or bonds
Sure.
or future?
I deliberately wrote our enabling legislation to make it pretty open. We can submit, whatever we think will work to the benefit of the city, any kind of project that we think is worthwhile doing. We may not have the authority to approve it. We have to submit it to the council and get their approval to submit it to some other agency if we need to coordinate with San Antonio or Parks and Wildlife or whomever. because the council has the ultimate decision as to which of our projects actually gets done. And so whatever projects we come up with, doesn't matter whether they're drainage, whether they're transportation, whether they're parks and wildlife, whatever they may relate to with regard to the city, if it's a project that is worthwhile, it provides us either a real benefit or solves a real problem, those are the projects that we're looking to put out,
I think
whatever they are.
as an ad hoc, you can develop and vet out a project and recommend it to city council.
Okay, okay. Because, I apologize for diverging, but I believe one of my big concerns is, we have engineering studies that clearly show our biggest drainage concerns we have is the water that's ingressing into the city from San Antonio. And if we had mitigated that as an issue, 90% of our drainage issues would, in my opinion, go away.
I agree, yeah,
And the Banyan issue, Carrollwood issue, Glen Tower, Tamworth, Manton, all those, in my opinion, would pretty much disappear.
certainly flooding is a big livability issue, I mean, that's, in my opinion, from my observation, that's by far the worst.
So that's why I'm asking if it's something that we could help trumpet that horn to move that process forward.
Yeah, and Mr. Rapley has some contacts with the city of San Antonio that might be useful in that context, where he could reach out to them and get perhaps some cooperation. There has been discussion that we've tried all this before. It doesn't mean we can't try it again. It may be that there's nothing we can do much short of a lawsuit, although I hate the idea of doing that. But that is a way to get the attention of the gorilla in the room.
It's a tool to use, not a preferable one, but you're right.
Yeah. So I think we ought to review whatever's been done in the past, see if we can take it a step further, go back and see if any of it can be revived and pursued further, or recommend whatever we come up with as the proper action to take.
And Skip, I have a quick question. I mean, so in listening to you, and I might be interpreting this wrong here, but it sounds like kind of the lowest hanging fruit from what I've been hearing right now is basically that West 410 intersection. That sounds like the one that we have the highest possibility of actually getting a successful bit of funding out of.
Yes.
Am I interpreting that correctly? Do you believe that's the case?
Yeah, I think that's true. I don't know what work the technical review committee is doing on this, or whether there's some other group of engineers in the MPO that's working on that particular intersection. But it's a problem for us. It's a problem for our police department. It's a problem for our citizens getting in and out of the city. It's a problem for our emergency vehicles getting between the north and south side, or getting down Jackson Keller or West Avenue even, when there is an emergency to respond to. So it's important for us to be able to try to do something about it, and it's important for the city. And because it affects the access to and from 410, it's important to TxDOT. And West Avenue is a farm road that has some input from TxDOT, and so is Northwest Military.
So would it be the case that perhaps we should go ahead and make some decision that once we get, this boilerplate FOIA information right here, the successful RFPs, if that's the correct terminology right here. Excuse me, I'm still very new at all the terminologies and such. But once we get that, would it be a good idea for us to go ahead and make a decision, perhaps that, well, let's go ahead and take this thing, which we believe is the lowest hanging fruit, has the highest degree of success, and kind of boilerplate that stuff, that success that the folks have already generated there on the RFP end of things, and do that as a group here, or at least as a subgroup, and try to go and come up with at least some sort of immediate, generation of work here to go ahead and try to get funding for that particular location.
Okay, I think that's a reasonable thing to do. What we have to do is to come up with some proposed changes to that intersection that would make a difference in traffic flow. And so we could conceivably set up a work session for maybe the next meeting, if that's what you want to do, and we can download Google Earth overhead shots of the intersection and the property there. There are some considerations. There's a 100-year-old oak on the corner of Northwest Military, West Avenue and 410, at the northwest corner of the lot that HEB is on.
Gorgeous oak tree.
Yeah.
We'd have to come up with some sort of risk to its movement, perhaps. I mean, if there is.
I don't think we
a
can
risk
move
and
it.
cost.
I don't think moving the tree is practical, but I think that it's possible. Well, why don't we do it as a work session? We'll get the diagrams, and I'll get a projector, and we can all look at it.
May I make a suggestion in that? There's the multiple ideas here on the table. The one that actually I'm kind of grabbing onto too is the West Avenue concern. I think it does make a lot of sense. Even because of the buses, any ISD buses utilize Gladiola because they can't get through that intersection. And so there's a lot of negative impacts to our city because of that. But my recommendation at this point would be let's go through these ideas and ferret them out. And if that one continues to rise to the top, which it's a good idea. But let's just have a talk on all of these on the next session. And if we want to prepare some information to help move that forward, we should consider it. But I mean, speed humps, I wanted to talk about speed humps, but I don't know if this is the time to get into speed humps.
I'd love to talk
can
about
talk
it.
about it. I mean,
I could talk about them all day long.
Yeah, because I'm a supporter of speed humps. I think we need it in the city, because it's only, a mechanical way is the only way to truly slow down, traffic full-time, in my opinion. And I think they do have their place in certain
When you have
streets.
long
cut-through
stretches of road that don't have any kind of stop signs or anything like that, I mean,
Right.
it's open to folks abusing that.
Right, but Bernard's brought up about, our parks and equipment and stuff like that. We need to probably have discussion on all these items, if that makes some sense.
Okay.
Potential for the next meeting, if we can do that.
Okay, let's make a list of those things. And we want to talk about speed control, speed bumps and stop signs.
I think the
Can we
idea-
just make that speed control in general, because, four-way stop signs would be, probably fit into that as well, too.
But I have several items that, from the accessing the track to the grants to the Parks and Wildlife, just the notes that we've talked about today, that I think should be just put down and we can have a discussion on at the next meeting, if that's okay. As we're developing ideas. And then my thought process here is, do we have other ideas at this point that we wanted to bring forward for the next session?
So I guess we have, sidewalks, West Avenue,
West Avenue, I brought
Speed
forward
control
walkability,
and walkability.
that, crosswalks, that's another thought,
Yeah. Would crosswalks fall into the walkability
I believe so.
thing? So that, it's kind of a general umbrella thing, how do we get pedestrians to move around the city? Sure.
Right. How do we tie our city together is what I'm thinking.
I think on the areas, you identify the locations first, and then you figure out what might be the traffic calming devices that would necessitate that. But whether it is speed humps or stop signs, to see if it's warranted along those lines. So obviously, there's a process involved, but I think first is determining the location of where it might be warranted. Whether it is a traffic, some type of traffic calming device, speed humps, or a stop sign.
Do we, I know we've gathered data in the past, but do we have that available for traffic counts? For example, Antler, some of the cut-through streets that we deal with?
Yes, PD does have those counts. We can get those as well for
Maybe
whatever,
good.
I mean, if there's not one street they've done, then we can actually see and have the traffic done as well.
Okay, that may be good to have available for our next discussion.
Do you know what streets we can request, the information on?
I'd recommend to Ryan just to go ahead.
Because
and forward
typically,
that.
like, speed humps have to be warranted either through traffic counts or the speed of the street. So those variables take into account, and they all follow the Texas Uniform Traffic Manual for the state from that standpoint, that all cities use.
Do you know if our traffic radar, the little device that you set out to notify people what their speed is, does it keep a record of the speeds of the number of cars that come by? And
I believe it keeps that data,
It does.
yes.
does it?
Yeah, it does account.
Then that would be helpful. We would get both the number of cars and the average speed.
I think most recently they use it on, I believe, Gladiola, when they were looking at some traffic.
Do they take a log of it? So every time they move it, do they log the before and after counts there, or whatever it would be to kind of say, okay, this is the location that we recorded, 800.
Yeah, I mean, they could set it up somewhere and give it a certain duration of time and set up for counts during that
But
period.
currently, do they do that? Do they log counts?
I'm sorry,
Do
said?
they currently log counts?
I believe they do, yes.
Okay, for each location that it's at,
Yes.
and the date and the time and stuff like that?
Exactly.
Okay, cool.
So
Good.
they recently had one on Honeysuckle. Do we have access or could we have access to?
Yes, I could talk to the chief to see what kind of data they pulled from the last time they had it at that location.
So, yeah, I think it'd be good to just, if we can do it right now, just tell them what streets we want. We could tell Mr. Rappley right now, we want Antler, we want Gladiola. I don't know which ones we want, but I'm just saying.
I think some of those streets that's already available, and so if Ryan could pull that for us, we should already have that data available.
But which streets?
No, I'm saying like the,
Or just,
like the
just the
Antlers.
whole thing?
Yeah, I think he could probably hold, I assume it wouldn't be hard for the chief just to get us every street that they've looked at and the associated information. Is that correct, Ryan? Sorry, I believe that the chief could provide us with all the streets they've put this unit on and the associated information with that traffic count,
Oh, okay.
speeds, that kind of stuff.
Just a spreadsheet of information here that we
Spreadsheet,
can
correct.
take a look at.
Even better, yeah.
I'll confirm that, but if it is possible and he does have that based on past times when they set up that radar, then we can get that for you.
Okay. And if not, I'd be glad to help out, maybe with Skip or somebody, or to help out to say, hey, we need this street, or whatever.
I'll be glad to help out with, street
Absolutely.
stuff is
Okay.
near and dear to my heart there.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And you deal with it unfortunately a lot, so.
Yeah, well, and the three, I don't know about the rest of the city, I can only just talk about, my parochial view here in my part of town, but between Atwater, Antler, and Harwick, it's sometimes rather risky to cross the street.
So Ryan, if he doesn't have the data, then Mark and I will get with him to say, hey, these are streets we think we should look at.
Yeah, if there's one that's not, where the radar's not been set up prior, then
Right.
just provide me that location, we can set it up.
Right.
I mean, there's a couple of streets, I don't know the name of them, it might be Carrollwood that goes between Northwest Military and.
Lock Hill, yeah,
Lock Hill, Selma, that's supposed to be one that's kind of a runway as well, too.
it is.
And there's a stop sign there.
These are streets that we'd certainly like to have some kind of look at and get some sort of, real analytics here that we can get numbers on.
Would it be appropriate then to invite maybe the police chief and/or Captain Zuniga and maybe Darrell Dover to come to our next meeting? If we're talking about traffic control, they have an interest in that police department from two measures. One is that they control traffic flow, and the other is that they have emergency responses to make. The same emergency response, of course, is the problem with the fire department. So they're interested in traffic control, but they're also interested in making sure that we don't put in some kind of a device at a place which is going to cause them a problem in responding to an emergency situation. And we don't want to do that either. Do you think that'd be appropriate?
I think to invite him or seek his
Just
input
invite him.
in that regard? Yeah, I believe that would be.
When we do our next work session, if we're going to do a work session next time?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. What else you got, John?
That's it.
Tanya, you have any?
So the last meeting we had a big discussion.
Tell me again. Pull your microphone
We
up.
had a big discussion on drainage from all the rains that we just had. And I know there was one particular area, street, I think there off of West Avenue. One of our residents gets a lot of water. I just didn't know which direction we were going with these drainage issues or proposals to City of San Antonio, the council as,
There's a drainage ditch, creek, if you like. It used to be a creek at one point that runs down to West Avenue. I've forgotten the street.
I know, I can't remember the
Are
street
you
name.
talking the Cobb residence?
Cobb residence,
Yes.
yeah. He is
There
at
was a
the
gentleman
corner.
that ran for city council, really nice guy. His house has been flooded, we discussed this.
Todd Herman?
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, and I keep on forgetting his name, sorry.
that.
Yeah, and his house has been flooded, I believe, no less than 5 times, and I think he's got a lawsuit himself. I don't know this for a fact, but I think
He's confirmed, yes. He has, I believe, filed suit against the developer, the Meritage developer. So, yes.
certainly that, perhaps inviting Todd and getting an idea of perhaps his lay of the land and understanding what's going on there.
I can give you a
Certainly
quick and
boots on the
dirty on
ground,
that. I've been out there several times to look at that problem, the drainage problem on Manton. That water comes down from San Antonio, right behind the Walgreens store where that construction is going on, where they have not put up their proper flood control blockages. But that water has been coming across right on West Avenue, flows across the lot on the corner of West and Lock Hill Selma, and then flows across Lock Hill Selma again at between West and Manton. And there's that creek bed essentially runs across the lot on the corner there of Manton and Lock Hill Selma, where that white steel fence is. And if you look in their lot, they have a little pond that they built there, and there's a little creek that runs out of that pond when the water is high, and runs across their lot into the lot next door, and then crosses Manton, right between Mr. Wright's house and I believe it's Mark Schnall's house, and then Todd's is the next one down, I think. And on the south side of Manton, it runs into about a 14 or 15 foot wide culvert, concrete culvert. Mr. Wright donated the land from his property to constitute part of that culvert. But the problem is that crossing Manton, that water gets fairly deep and extends some distance up the road on both sides of the low spot. And there's been some discussion, and I've looked at what can be done to mitigate that, and there's a lot of stuff that can be done. I mean, we could talk about it for quite a while, but we've only got a couple of more minutes, so I'm going to defer that to a future meeting.
If I can comment on that?
Sure.
The engineering work, the design work was done to go ahead and work to mitigate some of that, to mitigate some of that backup that's happening, that's causing the water to push back up Manton, or push down Manton, however you want to say
Yeah.
it. The thing is, I don't know why that project hasn't moved forward.
I don't know either.
It should have moved forward. I don't know. Ryan, are you familiar with that project that happened? It was a year ago.
Yeah, I think it was designed out. I think there was some thought of revisiting it because the idea lowered the street instead of having the water go under the street. So I thought there was some thoughts to revisit that. Obviously, that would escalate the cost of the construction ultimately on that work, the work on that project
But at the
itself.
very least, they were going to redesign the actual culvert to allow the line that drains into it, instead of forcing water up the line, it was going to actually, it was designed wrong from the beginning, years ago.
Yeah, and I believe it was, again, I'm not being here from that standpoint, but
Right.
the Street Drainage Committee recommended that design, and it was completed that way. Again, I'm not an engineer, but I've had thoughts of looking at it that says, I don't think it's a good idea to lower that street and allow for water to convey over that.
The thing about lowering is it makes the street impassable
Sure.
when there's water flowing across there.
But again, I'm not an engineer, but I think the water should convey underneath through some type of,
Let's run some culverts under there.
yeah, run some culverts, something like that. So,
Right.
I mean, we could revisit it. It might increase the cost a little bit on the design and ultimately the construction of it as well.
Okay,
So-
but again, I think the design work was done. They were just waiting to move forward. And again, it'd be good to know that actually project can resurrect and move forward as a small drainage project.
We looked at a project that was virtually identical up in Chavano Park, where they had raised a street 4 or 5 feet right in the middle and extended up the side of a low spot and put culverts underneath the street. And their engineering cost was about $300,000 to do the whole job.
It's KFW.
KFW, yeah, which is a small engineering company, and they're obviously still growing and hungry. And we need some of that kind of work. But, and this is almost an identical project. I've done several iterations of designs on paper and in my head about how that might best be done. But if there's one already done, I'd be happy to see it.
Because I think council approved it too, didn't they? On the project, the drainage project
For the Manton?
for Manton, yes.
Yeah, I don't recall that at this point.
I think it was just the design was initiated and approved from that
Okay.
standpoint. And I
Would
think
it
the
be
costs on
useful-
that, if I recall, were 120,000 to do that particular design for what, again, what they think is the best option.
At the time, that's what,
You know, and coming on board here and looking at it with our Public Works Director, I know we've been out there, Mr. McCormick, that, again, that's probably not the best option to have the water convey that way across that street. Especially as recent as Labor Day weekend when I was out there and took video. It's a lot of water going through there.
right.
What could we do as a group here, as a committee, to go ahead and help shepherd that, or champion that, or if that's even possible, or even preferable, or, you know, what is it, where can we?
One of the things that we should do is to take a look at the design. We've only got a couple of minutes because I think they want to build to set up for the Halloween party, which starts at noon. So we need to close out pretty quick. But one of the things we can do is to look at the existing design, what we have handy, and see what we think of it, and then take it to council and recommend that we proceed to do it with whatever money we have handy. If
Mark,
it says
I think we
something.
should task a council member to move that forward. What do you think?
I second that motion.
I'm gonna task Mr. Rampley to do that.
One of the things I would
Something
suggest to
rolled
this
downhill
group,
here.
I'm here to serve. One of the things I would suggest to this group, and speaking of drainage, is I'm close to finishing sort of the CIP, which will be two components of streets and drainage. And we're going to put forward the streets first, and then the second component will be drainage. So when we have that draft of prioritized drainage projects with a price tag, we can bring it in front of this group before we bring it to council eventually, if you'd like.
Yeah, we can look at it. We need to get finished up and adjourn.
Schedule.
Let me see, where'd my agendas go?
So you have the item number 6, the meeting
Yeah.
schedule and the date and time.
So when do we want to meet next time? 2 weeks again?
Sure.
Saturday, 2 weeks?
Reasonable, yes.
Yep.
What day is that going to be?
November 10th?
November 6th?
Okay, 10?
Third, the 10th would be November 10th, Saturday, November 10th?
Saturday, November 10th. 10 a.m.
Well, I know we have Jack is out this weekend and Robert is out. I assume he'll be back by then. Mr. Riley will be back by then too, hopefully.
I think so.
And Mr. Joyce had requested a copy of our master drainage study. And so I'm getting that electronically, and as soon as I get it, I'll send it out to all of you.
Super.
Nice.
Before we adjourn, one question is for Mark and I here. Can we get the chief to go ahead and email the street traffic count information, if it's available, or at least talk with us about it?
At least of what he has to date on what streets.
Exactly, please. Thank you.
Okay, I have,
Yeah, we're gonna have some hard data here to work with. That'd be great.
I have one announcement, Castle Hills Community Organization Halloween Party Movie Night at the Commons. I assume that's probably tonight. And I guess after that, we can entertain a motion to adjourn unless somebody else has anything. Any other announcements? Tanya?
Announcements?
John?
I move we adjourn.
I'll second.
In favor? Aye, we're adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rob.